Do you ever argue with Spirit? Does anybody here, other than me, ever just argue with Spirit? And it's never fruitful. It just creates panic and worry and chaos. And so I was immediately going, what am I going to talk about? But what I realized about that is it's not really my business. Yeah, it's really not my business, is it? Just to let go and see what comes and see what feels right, what feels good, what I feel in resonance with. And what came to me was to sort of continue what I talked about last week. And that is, for those of you who might not have been here, last week my talk title was You Are Jesus. And so I was talking about how Jesus really does represent our journey. And as the reading said earlier, that we have the opportunity to claim our divine inheritance. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, something he said inspired me about that. He's writing about different things, but he says, you are Jesus, and until we get that, that we are the authority, the power in our lives and in the world, that we will continue to recreate what we don't want. We will continue to be buffeted by the storms of life and to not really claim our power to create a world that really does reflect the divine qualities that we want to embrace. The divine qualities of love and harmony and order and peace and justice. And all of those ideas that we associate with the outflowing, the outpicturing of the divine in the world. A world that truly does work for all. And we are that potential, that power to do just that. But we continue to deny that. We continue to deny our own innate power and ability. And as long as we continue to do that, we're going to continue to recreate a world that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. And we will continue to create lives individually that don't necessarily work for us. And so I know that for some of us, as I said last week, being an old-time Baptist boy, to say that I am Jesus may sound somewhat blasphemous to some. But what I'm talking about is that I believe, and I'm going to assert this, that it doesn't really matter whether you consider yourself a Christian or a Christian or a Christologist, as Charles Fillmore sometimes said. It really doesn't matter if you consider yourself a Buddhist or a Jew or a Muslim, or whether you have just said, I'm not going to identify with any of that. I really do believe when we look deeply at the Jesus story, that the Jesus story is our story, metaphysically and metaphorically. And I want to be very clear that I'm separating in my own mind, in my own expression of that, separating out the narrative of Jesus and his life and his teaching from the Christian narrative about Jesus' life and Jesus' teaching. And I believe that's what our co-founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, were doing. When they said, Charles Fillmore said, unity is a link in the chain of a great educational movement that was inaugurated by Jesus Christ, and that our purpose is to discern the truth and to prove it. That's a very powerful word. To discern the truth in the teachings of Jesus and in the life of that Jesus, and to prove it. And so I think that's really what I want to stress for us. And let me say this about that. I don't want to be up here as if I am talking at you or talking to you. I am talking to myself as well. Because what I'm recognizing in my own life is how I have, in many ways, denied my own power in my life and created and manifested things that I would really like to have something different around. How I particularly can embrace the power that the divine is within me to move forward in my life, not only to create a life that in my own personal life that reflects those divine qualities, but then to move out and to assist more fully, more powerfully in community, creating a world that works for everyone. As their first song talked about, it all comes back to love. And really, isn't that what Jesus taught was love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. That was what Jesus taught. That was his philosophy. That was his greatest commandment, wasn't it? To love God and to love your neighbor and to love yourself. And so, what I was been exploring this week, again, for myself, and I'm really hoping it helps you as well, is that looking at some of the scriptures and metaphysically and metaphorically, which is how unity looks at the Bible, mostly, and how does that apply to my life? How might it apply to your life? The Jesus story. And one scripture that I've always loved is the story where Jesus is talking to his disciples. And they've gone away, they've gone into a private place, and he's talking to his disciples, and he says, "Who do the people say I am?" And they say, well, some say you're Elijah, some say you're Jeremiah, some say you are one of the other prophets. And Jesus said, well, who do you say I am? And Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, when we look at that story, I want you to place yourself in the role of Jesus in the story. I want you to place yourself in the role of Jesus in that narrative. And I want you to imagine that you're not talking to anyone else. You're meditating, you're having your own contemplation. And you, in your own mind, awareness of your own thoughts, your energy of thought and feeling for yourself, and you say, who do you say I am? And what do you get? Well, you're a man, you're a woman, you're a minister, you're a musician, you're an accountant. And some of my thoughts say, well, you're an idiot. You're a fraud. You're fake. Some of my thoughts might say that about me, my own mind. So imagine, what are your thoughts saying about you? Who do your thoughts say you are? And really be honest about that. And then if you go deeper into that meditation, but who do you, at the very core of your being, when you listen to that inner light, the inner knower, the divine spark within you, who do you say I am? And without a doubt, that voice will say, you are the Christ. You are the child of the living energy of life that is God. You are an expression of the divine, imbued with all of the qualities and the powers that you associate with the divine. It's the same voice that comes into your awareness as it did with the life of Jesus when it said, you are my child in whom I am well pleased. That is who you are. And that, as Jesus said, continuing in that story, is the rock on which you must build your life. The rock on which we must build our life is the firm foundation of knowing who we truly are. As divine expressions, the Christ, the only begotten idea in the divine mind for you and me. That is who you are. That is who I am. And until we really get that, until we get that we are not those thoughts, we will continue to allow those thoughts to rule our lives and to limit our expression of who we truly are. I love the story as well where the disciples are out on the boat and the storm comes up and they're rocked by the waves and the winds and they're afraid. And then all of a sudden they look and there's Jesus walking on the water. Peace, be still. Do not be afraid. And Peter wants to go out and meet him. So Jesus says, come on out of the boat. So Peter walks out onto the water. He's walking for a minute, and all of a sudden he just falls in. Jesus picks him up. Who are you in that story? Who are you in that story? Are you Peter? Most of the time, I think we think of ourselves as Peter, the one who has little faith, the one who may step out in faith and then fall, and then beat ourselves up for not having enough faith. But who are we in the story? As Charles Fillmore said, until you get that you are Jesus in the story, you're going to continue to be the one that keeps falling. You are the power. You are the power. You have the power, the divine authority to lift yourself up, to speak to those thoughts in your own mind. The disciples in the story, again, represent the thoughts, the feeling nature that is buffeted by the world, buffeted by the storms of life that come to all of us. We get the opportunity to claim our power to say, peace, be still, be not afraid. And to walk out into our lives without maybe not, we may have the fear, but we can walk out into our lives with faith and walk through the fear. I know it's not always easy. And it takes our practice. It takes our willingness to take that first step. But that's the power of claiming that. You are Jesus in the story. You are the one who has the power to say to your mind, to have dominion over your mind and over your feelings. Now let me say very clearly about that. I'm not saying ignore your feelings. I'm not saying don't feel your feelings or suppress your feelings or your thoughts. What I'm saying is know that you have dominion. That doesn't mean to ignore them, to suppress them, to push them away. It means to not let them control you. Not let your feelings and your thoughts take the lead and act from them. It means having dominion. I'm aware of my thinking. I'm aware of my feeling. I can feel my feeling. I can connect with who I am and what's going on in my life, and then I can respond to that. As Thea reminded me last week when she left, I talked about not being responsible for your life, but being, she said, response-able, which I love. We're able to respond to what happens in our lives. We can't control it all, But we're responsible in our lives. So I love that story. But you are not Peter in the story. You are Jesus in that story. And the other story that came to me this week, or when I began to meditate on this, was the story about where Jesus, where the man was asking for money and healing, who had been crippled, not able to walk. And Jesus goes to him and he says, "Take up your bed and walk." Take up your bed and walk. Who are you in that story? Who are you in that story? What I want to say to us today is, even though we do have some accountability for making the bed, we don't have to lie in it. Whatever bed you have made in your life, you do not have to lie in it. You have the power in your own essence to take up your bed, to say to yourself, take up this bed. Whether that bed is a job that is draining your life energy, whether that is a relationship that is not working for you, that is not enriching you, whether that is an illness, whether that is debt, whatever it is that is showing up in your life, whatever bed you might have made for yourself, you do not have to lie in it. That was the most powerful message that I received this week. That I can say to myself, take up your bed. What? It's kind of like this image of taking up this bed, that I've been living in, and really looking at the bed that I have created. And being willing to recreate the bed. Again, it doesn't necessarily happen like that. But it's the power to say, take up the bed, look at it, explore it, investigate it, make a decision about it, and then take up your bed and walk. Again, take that first step toward recreating a new bed, a new way of life, a new idea of who you truly are. And again, it does all come back to our willingness to claim our power, to stop telling the stories about who we are not, and begin to claim the story about who we are. To let go of the things in our lives that no longer serve us. Again, not always easy. But there's one more story that really spoke to me, that I think has been confusing for a lot of us. It always had been for me. When Jesus was with the disciples and they're on the road and they see a fig tree that has leaves on it. And fig trees they have their fruit before they have their leaves quite often. And so he figured, well, it has leaves, it must have fruit. So he goes to the tree and there's no fruit. There's nothing to feed him. And so there's one story about him withering the tree. Say, you will no longer produce fruit. There's another gospel says he cursed the tree. Now, why would Jesus curse a tree? But again, it was like, oh, I get it. I finally get it. That what Jesus was showing is that metaphorically, you have the power to take back the life energy from whatever is in your life that is no longer producing fruit that nourishes you, that feeds you, that supports you. Not to curse it, but to bless it with love and say, yes, I'm ready to renounce this. I'm taking back my life energy because that does not produce the fruit that nourishes my life. Again, claiming that the Jesus story is your story and my story. That the Jesus of the Scripture, when we understand it metaphorically and metaphysically, letting go as much as we can of the Christian narrative or the meaning about the story, but to look at the story, put yourself in the stories. If I am Jesus in the story, what does that represent to me? What is the story trying to tell me about my own power in the world? And truly, to do it all from the greatest degree of love and compassion for yourself. It's so easy to go into those ideas and say, oh, why was I thinking that? Why was I doing that? Why was I giving my energy to that? Oh, I really am an idiot. Oh my God. No. Love yourself. Give love to everything. Because truly, love is the only power that can bring the healing in your life that you want. And when we love it, we can return to the awareness, as Jesus said, love God. Love that essence of life that is within you. Love it. Give it energy. Give it time. Give it your attention. Give it all that you have. Know that it is you. Love your unique and wonderful expression of that life. And as you do that, love your neighbor as yourself. When we do that, we become full, complete, powerful expressions of that life. And I believe that's why we're here. I believe that's why you are here, why I am here, and I believe that's why we're so unique. Because we each have something to give to that vision. So I encourage you this week and every day of your life to begin to claim that truth for yourself. You know, if the idea of Jesus doesn't work for you, claim that you are the Buddha nature. Claim that you are the light, the divine light. Claim that you are the power, the presence. Claim that you are that one, an expression of the one life. And how can that show up in the world?